And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. Happy to have you with us. All right. Playing the part of United States Federal District Court Judge Tanya S. Chutkan. Playing that part will be me. Playing the part of Thomas N. Saunders, federal prosecutor in the National Security Section of the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. That part will be played also by me. And playing the part of Robert Driscoll, who represents accused Russian secret agent Maria Butina as her defense attorney. That part will also be played by me. And I know that sounds cheap. It's a delicate balance here, though. I mean, what we're saving on the salaries of actors with speaking roles, we're making up for in terrible acting by me. So what's going on here is that accused Russian secret agent Maria Butina has been in jail now for a week and a half. She was arrested last weekend, right before the Trump-Putin summit in Helsinki. She was actually arrested before the summit started, even though we didn't find out about it at the time. The court didn't unseal the case against her until a few hours after the summit was concluded. Now, the coincidence of those two events is potentially interesting because she's accused of being an agent of the Russian Federation, right? Secretly mounting an influence operation in this country on behalf of the Russian government to influence the Republican Party around the 2016 presidential election, right? Since they unsealed her case right after the summit ended, we have learned a lot of interesting stuff about what exactly the government is accusing her of. And it's all fascinating, right? I think we are hardwired as humans to think that secret agent stuff is just inherently fascinating. Otherwise, there wouldn't be books with shiny covers for sale in airport bookstores, right? We love this stuff. But in terms of the news, in terms of the country, in terms of this presidency, in terms of the big scandal that has followed the president home from that summit with Putin in Helsinki last week, there does remain one really big, as yet unanswered question about the Maria Butina case. Does her case stand alone? Or does it link into the larger Russia scandal, the other prosecutions, the Russian government's effort to swing the election? Does it link in to the crucial question of whether the president and his campaign were somehow in on that Russian operation to influence the election? So, today, court hearing for Maria Butina. And I should tell you, the bottom line here is that part of what came out in this court hearing today is that prosecutors say her case is connected to the larger story. At least the evidence in her case is connected, they say, to other ongoing cases and investigations. I should warn you in advance, there's also a little argument about sex and her personal diary. I swear it is relevant to the larger questions here, but you should know what happens. Okay, here goes. So this is the initial discussion in court, starts right away, and it's about discovery. It's about the evidence and materials the prosecution has seized in their case against Maria Butina. And this question's now being litigated in court as to whether and when and how her defense lawyer is going to be allowed to see all that stuff that the government has seized. Okay, so here we go. Mr. Saunders, the prosecutor. Good morning, Your Honor. Thank you very much. The judge, good morning. Prosecutor. We've had some preliminary discussions about discovery. I think that where we are right now is that the government has substantial discovery that they're ready to turn over right away. Right now, we already have about 4 to 6 terabytes of data, the equivalent of over 1.5 million files that we're ready to turn over just as fast as it can be loaded onto a portable hard drive. There's another batch of data, approximately 4 to 6 terabytes, and then the judge jumps in. Let me stop you. With regard to that first batch, how long do you think that will take to transfer? Prosecutor. Well, barring the issue of a protective order, which I'll get to in a moment, it shouldn't take more than a couple days. The judge says, all right, okay. Prosecutor. The second batch of data, I think, should be ready in maybe 2 weeks. And again, once it's ready, it shouldn't take more than a couple of days to put it onto a hard drive and provide it to defense counsel. The judge says, okay. Prosecutor. So the bottom line is, the government wants to provide this to the defense right away, immediately, so that they can begin to prepare their defense in the courtroom. The problem we're having is, Your Honor, agreeing on a protective order. And a protective order, from the government's position, is essential, not just for the normal reasons of protecting third parties' personal identifying information, but also to protect potential ongoing investigations. and just given the sensitive nature of this case. And in our discussions, the question that seems to be overlying the conflict between the two parties, to put it frankly, is whether or not the defense counsel wants this information right away so he can prepare for a defense in this court, or if defense counsel wants this information so that they can use it on cable news. The reason I put it that way, Your Honor, is that we've proposed a basic protective order that says the information can be used for their defense in this case. It gives the defense wide latitude to use it in this case, including showing it to the appropriate witnesses, showing it to those witnesses' attorneys. The defense rejected that offer. And the defense's response is, no, we should have free rein to use that material however we want. Now, our protective order says that you can use it for this case, but you can't use it for other purposes, including public disclosure, like going on the press. And the defense says, no, 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 we should have free rein. That's an exact quote from defense counsel. Now, our concerns about protecting this information would be, and then the judge jumps in, other than the personal identifying information, what are your other security concerns? Prosecutor. Our concerns are about protecting the integrity of potential ongoing investigations, not just related to this case, but potential other cases as well. And the judge says, all right. Potential other cases as well that might be affected by the disclosure of the evidence in the Maria Butina case. So the prosecutors here are telling the judge, it's bad that Maria Butina's defense lawyer has been going on dreaded cable news and talking about her case, defending her in the court of public opinion. And over the course of this hearing today, they go on to fight with him about why that is bad in and of itself. The judge at one point says to Maria Butina's defense lawyer, do you think it's in your client's interest to have her case tried in the press? She later tells Butina's defense lawyer bluntly, quote, I certainly don't want to have to impose a gag order as other judges have in other cases in this court, but I will entertain a motion or a request to do so if I think that your statements cross the line and violate our local rules. So I am cautioning you. So there's this fight in court today over the defense lawyer for Maria Butina talking to the press about her case, and the prosecution is pressing their argument, and the judge seems to basically agree that Butina's defense lawyer shouldn't be doing that. The judge bluntly warns her defense lawyer that basically he should watch it in terms of him talking to the press. She also later tells the defense counsel that there, quote, will be a protective order in this case, at least for some material, which means the judge said today in open court that she will set limits on what Butina can do and can't do with the evidence against her that the government has turned up once the government has to hand that over to them so they can prepare their defense. So they have this fight today. It definitely lands in a very one-sided way. But for us watching this case and thinking about the national significance of this case and how this fits into the bigger existential scandal that looms over this presidency, right? On the big question of does this dramatic case against this accused Russian agent play into the larger scandal involving Russia and the election and all the other indictments that have come out? I mean, the prosecutors today said, yeah. They said, yeah, this case is connected. It's connected to other ongoing cases and other potential cases as well. And they're saying that's related to why we need to stop her attorney from putting the evidence against her out in the press. That stuff is sensitive. It relates to ongoing cases and potentially other cases as well. The judge goes with that. Here's the defense lawyer. Quote, Your Honor, the government's theory is that the documents and items that were possessed by my client before they were seized by the government somehow become confidential once they're seized by the government. And when the government gives them back, they can protect them under a protective order. The judge jumps in. But, Mr. Driscoll, if material that was seized, that was in the possession of the defendant, concerns material, for example, on her computer that the government is using in connection with an ongoing investigation, well, merely because it was in the possession of your client doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be kept confidential, because there are ongoing investigations. The fact that it was in your client's possession doesn't give it some kind of talismanic protection. And so I'm not clearly understanding your position, defense lawyer. I mean, it's my position that it's the government's burden to say what needs to be protected and why. For example, my client's diary, my client's notes All those kinds of things are just simply documents of my client's immigration papers, all those things. Simply because they came into the possession of the government, she doesn't lose her First Amendment rights or her ability to do with those documents what she wants. The judge: well, this is a pending criminal case. I'm sort of curious as to what you would be planning to do with her immigration documents or her diary in advance of the trial. Defense lawyer: well, I mean, they might be evidence at the trial, but there might be other purposes for which they would be used. There are ongoing congressional investigations, for example, that we've been dealing with. A lot of these same documents have already been produced to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Judge: well, certainly, if those documents are subjects of a subpoena, you can go to the government and say that these documents or these items have been subject to subpoena. So this is the judge whittling the defense lawyer down to a toothpick here. Right? He's saying, hey, this was her stuff that the government seized. We should be able to do whatever we want with it. You can't stop us from giving it to the press. The judge basically says, seriously, it's evidence in a criminal trial. And if what was seized from her is relevant to other ongoing open investigations, then of course you can't do anything you want with it. And on that last point from the transcript there about how his client has already been questioned by other parts of the government, where he raises congressional investigations and stuff, that actually ends up being important too. We'll come back to that in a second. But there's just this one last thing you should see from the hearing today. I mentioned that there was a discussion about sex-related allegations. This is that part. It does not go well for the defense lawyer. But remember where this came from. Last week, the prosecutors laid out a case for the judge that Maria Butina shouldn't be released on bail. They were arguing that she's a flight risk, that she might basically go back to Russia. They said there was no reason to expect that she'd feel bound to stay in the United States and face this trial. And in order to make that case, the prosecutors argued that what appeared to be her personal ties, even her emotional ties to the United States, they argued that those ties weren't real. This is what they filed with the court last week under the headline, Butina's, quote, tie to the United States is a duplicitous relationship. This was prosecutors a few days ago. Quote, during the course of this investigation, the FBI has determined that Maria Butina gained access through U.S. Person 1 to an extensive network of U.S. persons in positions to influence political activities in the United States. Butina, age 29, and U.S. Person 1, age 56, are believed to have cohabitated and been involved in a personal relationship during the course of Butina's activities in the United States. But this relationship does not represent a strong tie to the United States because Maria Butina appears to treat it as simply a necessary aspect of her activities. For example, on at least one occasion, Butina offered an individual other than U.S. Person 1 sex in exchange for a position within a special interest organization. Further, in papers seized by the FBI, Butina complained about living with U.S. Person 1 and expressed disdain for continuing to cohabitate with U.S. Person 1. So that was the prosecution last week. They're saying, listen, she's a spy. She's only involved with this guy because it's part of her cover as a spy. Today, Butina's defense lawyer went off on that. He and his client are absolutely not going to stand for that from the prosecution. He went after them on this specific issue in court today, and it didn't go well. Defense lawyer: we did make a special request with the government to receive, on an expedited basis, any evidence they had to back up their claim that Ms. Butina traded sex for a job. That has become, unfortunately, a big issue in the media. It was proffered, as proffered in the bond hearing before. We have no idea what the government's talking about. We don't believe it's true. And the government has. We presume they could just give that part of it to us so we could see what it is. And the government has not agreed to do that. They said we can wait till discovery to do that. And then the judge jumps in. Mr. Saunders, she's speaking to the prosecutor now. Mr. Saunders, prosecutor, what's your position with regard to the information that Mr. Driscoll just requested? Prosecutor: our position is twofold. One is we want to make sure the protective order is in place before giving over anything. And second, we're concerned about to what use anything will be put. And if the defense is seeking particular pieces of evidence so they can take them to the news media, we don't want that violation of the local rules. The judge: right. I mean, I think, Mr. Driscoll, you're certainly entitled to discovery. You're certainly entitled to know the basis of the charges against your client in accordance with our local rules. but I'm not sure you're entitled to specific pieces of evidence to rebut media reports. You know, I'm sure it's not pleasant to read incorrect things about your client. No lawyer likes that. But my obligations here are to get this case resolved, whether that be through trial or any other way, in an expeditious and fair manner. So to the extent that you'll get that information, you'll get it as you would any other information in this trial. So no, I'm not helping you figure out why the government said that thing about your client and trading sex for a job. The prosecution has said that part of Maria Butina's secret cover for her operation in this country on behalf of the Russian government is that she was supposedly romantically involved with this older man, a Republican political activist in South Dakota. Now, the government is making that public case because they say that relationship wasn't an earnest relationship. It wasn't real. They're saying that was part of her cover story as a secret agent carrying out this influence operation on behalf of the Russian government. Now, whether or not it turns out to have been true love, this ends up being sort of a key element in how the Maria Butina secret agent case relates to the rest of the Russia scandal and potentially to the president's campaign. I mean, there's a few of these connections, actually. This is one of them. One of the links that's already established is that prosecutors say Maria Butina was funded for this U.S. operation by a Russian billionaire. The Washington Post has since named that Russian billionaire. They have also reported that that Russian billionaire's son worked on the Trump campaign. We have contacted the Trump campaign to ask them about whether that's true, and if so, what role was played on the campaign by the son of the man who's alleged to have funded this Russian influence operation during the campaign. So far, we have not heard back from the campaign on that. We will let you know when we do. Another potential link to the Trump campaign is through this guy, U.S. Person 1, the unnamed American citizen who Maria Butina was involved with in this potentially ersatz personal relationship. He lives in South Dakota, and I am here to sing the praises of a local hero, South Dakota journalist named Seth Tupper from the Rapid City Journal, because Mr. Tupper today tracked down a proposed order of cooperation between Maria Butina and federal prosecutors in South Dakota, an offer that dates back to May of this year. Maria Butina was apparently at least considering offering testimony or evidence to prosecutors, to federal prosecutors, for their investigation of her supposed boyfriend in South Dakota. She was offering the U.S. attorney in South Dakota, or she was considering an offer from the U.S. attorney in South Dakota that she would cooperate with them in their investigation of her supposed boyfriend. Now, depending on how things worked in that particular relationship, that would seem to bolster the prosecution's case that maybe this wasn't true love. Right? If she was talking to prosecutors about what evidence she might be able to give them against her guy. Well, her guy, this American man, has not been charged with anything, as far as we know. But he is described in court filings as basically a co-conspirator, helping her with her efforts to influence the Republican Party, in large part through the NRA. It is, I just have to say, just stepping back from this for a second, it is remarkable that the NRA has had no comment on this case at all. No comment on this indictment since it was first unsealed. I mean, this is federal prosecutors, including veteran counter-espionage prosecutors, now saying in court and offering evidence in court that the NRA was used extensively by the Russian government in an illegal intelligence operation. Really? No comment on that at all, NRA? None at all? For more than a week now? In January, McClatchy reported that the FBI was investigating whether the Russian government funneled money through the NRA to help Trump win the election. And that might have seemed nuts at the time when McClatchy published that report. But you know what? That was before we got this indictment about how else Russia was using the NRA to try to influence the election. That was before Butina's defense lawyer said in court that Maria Butina was contacted by the FEC in March about, quote, whether or not certain donations had been made to political campaigns. That was before the Washington Post reported today that Maria Butina testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee that one of her sources of funding in the United States in 2016 was a $5,000 a month consulting deal she had with the Outdoor Channel television network to provide advice on a planned program on hunting in Russia. How did she get hooked up with the Outdoor Channel? Quote, the Outdoor Channel's chief executive, Jim Libator, accompanied an NRA delegation that was hosted by Maria Butina in Moscow in December 2015. And indeed, red arrow, there's the guy from the Outdoor Channel and a whole bunch of officials from the NRA in Moscow in December 2015 with accused Russian agent Maria Butina. December 2015, that's exactly the same time that Trump National Security Advisor Mike Flynn was also in Moscow, sitting next to Vladimir Putin at a banquet dinner for Russian state TV. It's the same time period, December 2015, right before the Republican presidential primary started. What was the NRA all doing in Moscow right before then? What was Mike Flynn doing in Moscow before then? The Outdoor Channel would not confirm to the Washington Post today that they did have this accused Russian agent on their payroll for $5,000 a month in 2016. But we actually were able to reach them late in the day today, and they did confirm to us that, yes, they did. They had her on the payroll, $5,000 a month. Now, there's no reason to think that the Outdoor Channel knew at the time that the person they had put on their payroll was a secret agent who is now accused of running a Russian government influence operation to influence our election. There's no indication that they knew that's what they were doing at the time, but that is what they did. And so, last point here. Were these gun rights folks potentially a conduit for Russian money alongside other forms of Russian government influence on our 2016 campaign? I mean, McClatchy was on that story first. Honestly, they took tons of heat for that story, and they stood by it throughout. But now, I mean, I don't think they'd take heat for that story today, right? Now it is a much more open question. It would be really, really good to find that out. The NRA, according to federal prosecutors, was a conduit for a secret Russian government influence operation designed to hit the campaign. Were they the conduit for another kind of influence from Russia, too? McClatchy reports that the FBI has been looking into Russian money flowing through the NRA to benefit Trump. Did that happen? On the day we learned that Maria Butina was arrested, on the day her arrest warrant, the criminal complaint against her, the FBI affidavit against her, the day that was all unsealed, on the day of the Trump-Putin summit in Helsinki, the Trump administration that day unveiled a new rule. They announced they would be dropping the requirement, which has existed for nearly 50 years in this country. They would be dropping the requirement that organizations like the NRA have to disclose their major donors to the IRS. On the day the Maria Butina case was unsealed, they dropped that requirement. Seriously. Why that new rule? And why that day?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.